What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Just wanted to remind you guys to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying this video. If you guys are enjoying the daily true scary stories and these longer videos, doing so really helps out the channel and ensures the videos do well, so I can continue with this schedule for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about making these videos is reading your guys' thoughts on the stories therein. Without further ado guys, I will let you enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I will see you again at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. This is something that happened to me in the 1990s. My name is Jennifer, and I had recently moved into a house in a pretty typical neighborhood. It was about 30 minutes outside of a major city, and I was renting a smaller 2-bedroom home. I lived by myself at the time, and had a cord phone that was attached to the wall in the kitchen. That was my only phone back then, and I didn't even have a cell phone at all. I remember one night I randomly got a call very late. It was sometime after 10 o'clock, I believe, but I don't remember the exact time. Obviously, it's very unusual to get calls at that hour, especially from like telemarketers or something. I guessed it must have been from a family member, or even a friend perhaps. I answered it, but when I picked up the phone, there was a man on the other end I didn't immediately recognize. Hello? Hi, is this Jennifer speaking? I said yes, and asked who this was that was calling. He didn't really answer me. The guy just started rambling. He said I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and described me in vast detail. He went on and on about how much he liked me. I thought this was really weird, because I didn't even recognize this voice at all, and had no idea who he could be. When I asked him again who he was, he didn't answer me. When he refused to tell me who he was, I started to feel really uncomfortable about things. I ended up just hanging up on him. It was one of the strangest phone calls that I had ever gotten. Clearly, this guy had seen me before somewhere. He described enough of me for it to be sure that he really did know me, and he also knew my name somehow. I knew all the people at my job though, and he didn't sound like anybody from there. I just had no idea who it could be. I was hoping he wouldn't call back, but of course he did just a short time later. It was only about 10 minutes after I'd initially hung up on him the first time. When I answered the phone, I heard him begin talking again, and almost hung up on him immediately. What he said in that split moment, though, shocked me so much that I couldn't do so at all. He said he was already there, and to let him in. That was followed shortly by a knocking at my front door. Whoever this guy was, he was right outside my home. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even want to look out to see who this man was. I was too scared. My blinds were closed anyways, so I couldn't see him. I didn't say anything to the man. He repeated himself, and finally I mustered up the courage to ask him to go away. The man said he wasn't going anywhere, and I heard him begin knocking once more. I told the man I was going to call the police if he didn't leave, but he didn't seem to be bothered at all. In a taunting tone, he said, "Well, what are they gonna do?" I hung up on him after that, and dialed 911. I told the operator what was going on, and I was told that somebody would be out there shortly. After I got off the phone with the police, I did not hear any further knocking. The guy also didn't call me back. After maybe 10 minutes, the police got there. An officer knocked on the door, which at first I thought was the man again. I checked out the window though and saw it really was an officer. I let him in and informed him about what happened. He looked around my front and backyard, searching the entire property. Unfortunately, the man was long gone. He must have left after I called them. The officer asked me a few questions and said he would be around the area for a while. If something happened, to call again immediately. I did feel slightly better, but not a whole lot. I knew this guy was still out there somewhere. I was afraid he might come back and be angry. Maybe he'd even try to break in this time. After the police left, about 20 minutes or so went by when I heard a knocking at my front door again. My heart sank, knowing it was the same guy coming back. There was a slim chance it was the police again, though, so I carefully and slowly crept toward my front window. I moved the blinds just slightly, just enough to see who was out there. I couldn't get a good view at all, but I could tell it was not the police officer. When I saw this, I moved away from the window and ran back to the phone. I called the police again and told them the man had returned. I was only on the phone with the police for a minute or so. After I got off the phone with them, the man called again. He was still knocking on the door as well. I answered his call, wondering what he wanted now. "You shouldn't have called the cops on me, Jennifer." He then asked me to let him in again. I really didn't know what to say, and I was really nervous. Eventually, I just hung up on him. Only a minute or two after this, I heard voices outside my house. The officers had come back, and it sounded like this time they'd actually caught the man. I went to my window and looked out. Sure enough, it was true. When I saw the guy, though, I couldn't believe who it actually was. It was my next-door neighbor, a guy who lived all alone in the house next to me. His name was Dan, and I'd only spoken to him in passing a single time before. He must have been observing me whenever I went outside. Sometimes I would go on walks in the neighborhood or do yard work. What a creep that guy was. I was able to get a restraining order against him, and luckily after that, I never did see him again. There's a toilet stall in my school's bathroom that doesn't open. It's just always locked, it seems, and no one really can say why. It's the bathroom on the first floor of the north building, and the stall that won't open is the furthest one from the bathroom door. It's locked up tight, and it doesn't budge at all. It's pretty weird, to be honest with you. The north building is rarely used, and the rooms in that building aren't even being used for lessons currently. It's become more of a storage location. Due to the fact that not many people use that building, of course it wasn't long before creepy rumors began to spread around our school. There was a rumor going around that if you knocked on the door that never opens, something would knock back. The kids at the school said the paranormal lurked beyond that door, some kind of spirit or ghost. They said even that if you asked if anyone was there, you would get a response too. It seemed like all everyone was talking about was that stall door. Of course, no one could really agree on what the reply would be, though. I heard many different things and exaggerations. Well, one day I decided to go see if those rumors were true. A couple other boys from my class wanted to test their mettle as well. We arranged to meet on the first floor of the north building when the sun went down. We didn't need to wait long after school for it to get dark, since it was during the winter. All of the restrooms in this building were supposed to have the same layout, I guess, because the shape of the building never changed from floor to floor. That bathroom, though, had this kind of weird atmosphere. I don't know how to put it, really. Just felt like there was a presence there. It was very quiet that day. You could have heard a pin drop in that bathroom. The first thing I noticed was the closed stall. We all headed over to it. Some of the boys were braver than the others, and some immediately tried yanking on the door handle in an attempt to wrench it open. No matter how much they pushed and pulled, the door didn't seem to budge. We thought we might be able to take a look at whatever was inside that stall by standing on the toilet and the one next to it and peeking over the wall. We quickly realized, though, that that was going to be impossible. It was boarded from the top of the stall door to the ceiling. Well, there was only one more option we could try, knocking on the door to see if the rumors were true. We didn't know who should knock first. No one really wanted to volunteer. My friend went over to the door and just started knocking. I began to feel a strange surge of chills race through me at the very moment he knocked on the door. I put it down to the fact I was feeling more than a little nervous. We all stood there in silent anticipation to see if a ghost really would reply to my friend's knocking. But of course, no response came. He turned around and faced the rest of us with a sly smile on his face. He then shrugged and said, "Guess I'll try this then. Is anybody there?" The only response we received was the sound of the tap dripping in the sink on the other side of the room. "Alright, well, I guess the rumor's false, guys," he said. After that, the tension in the room began to dissipate. We all calmed down a little and began to joke and crack wise about the situation. "Guys, I'm gonna take a break and then we're getting out of this super scary bathroom." Most of my friends took a whiz. At that same time, my friend was showing off his confidence by whistling as he went to the bathroom. It had a completely new atmosphere when suddenly a noise cut through the bathroom. It was a creaking sound that I recognized immediately. I couldn't physically bring myself to look in the direction of that noise. Guys, I think the stall door is open now." We all agreed, but not one of us wanted to turn to face the stall. No one dared to look back. I was the closest one to the door that never opened, and after I'd finished relieving myself, I shook off my fear and turned to face it. One of my friends had beaten me to it, though. I heard him scream and watched him run out of the bathroom. This, of course, set off mass hysteria between us, and we all started screaming and running too. We left the bathroom and ran to our friend, who'd gotten out first. He was sitting down on the floor with his back against the wall. "Hey man, are you okay? What happened?" Questions like that we fired at him from all angles. When he replied, it was quite shocking. "I don't know, guys. I saw something in there. It was like a small shrine, an altar to worship of some kind." "Why would that be in there? It's a bathroom stall." We all looked at him skeptically. "It really was there, I swear." We all wanted to go back in there to see if we could see it. We all formed a line and slowly opened the bathroom door. As soon as we were back in, we could all see the stall door was closed again. That was really shocking. We thought we were the only ones in the building, and we had just left the bathroom a short time ago. It didn't seem possible for it to be closed again without someone interfering. We went over to the door and all had a go at trying to pry it open again, but it wouldn't budge. It was sealed up tight, almost as if it had never opened at all. Thing is, we'd all experienced it. It was a very weird experience, and one that left us with more questions than answers. It turned out the rumors were not true about hearing a reply from the other side, or hearing someone responding to you or knocking on the door. But the thing is, I couldn't explain what happened there in that afternoon. It seemed there definitely was something strange and creepy in that stall. If there was some kind of altar for worship in there, what exactly were they trying to worship? Why would you keep it hidden in a bathroom stall at a place at our school? None of it made any sense. A few weeks went by and we all kind of forgot about what happened. I think for me personally, the reason I forgot was because I couldn't process it well, and my brain just wanted to get rid of it. It was occupying too many of my thoughts. Shortly after I entered high school, my mother disappeared. After school, my dad sat me down and told me in a very serious tone about what happened. He said that my mom had been having an affair, and she had a boyfriend that none of us knew about for several years apparently. I remember that moment where I felt my heart sink. It was when my dad said she had abandoned him and I. He hung his head low after he said that, and it's a moment that my mind keeps replaying from time to time. I decided in that moment that I would make efforts to show him just how much he meant to me, to cherish him just as much as I had cherished my mother. Strange goings-on began to happen at my home after that day. I can't say all of them are unexplainable, because a house suddenly without a mother to a high school girl would certainly take some adjusting. There were some things going on for sure, though. We kept finding hair everywhere, long black hair. I had short dyed brown hair at the time, so it certainly wasn't mine, and my dad didn't have long hair either. It was weird as hell. In addition to the strange hair, we noticed that doors which we were certain we had closed would be opened, and certain things around the house went missing. My dad said he was concerned that my mom was getting in and out of the house while we were away, but I didn't know what to think. I don't know why, but my first thought was something closer to my mom is dead. I guess because of all that was happening in our home, it felt close to some sort of paranormal activity, rather than some random person breaking in. I kept thinking about it and pondering what was going on. Not many days had passed at this point, from the time that my dad had told me my mom had left. One day, something clicked with me. It was the sight of a certain pair of shoes that were right by the door. They were very sentimental and belonged to my mother. Surely, if she had just planned on running away from her family, she would have left wearing those, or at least taking them with her. So why were they still there? My mind produced a strange and frightening thought. If that's still there, and I discovered various other items belonging to her tucked away as well, then what happened to my mom? Why did she leave all these things behind? I suppose it's possible I just could have been trying to cope with the thought of her having abandoned me. But why had this all happened? I had lots of thoughts and emotions to process, and I certainly doubted my theory. My gut didn't doubt it as much as my head, though. It niggled away at me and ate away. I felt the urge to question my father further, but then I went against it. I had already lost my mother. If I got my father in trouble or pushed him away from me, then who would take care of me? I'd have no parents to protect me. I knew that my dad loved my mom, and I didn't think he would lie to me. Why would he do anything to her anyway? If I was wrong about my strange theory, then I don't know how I could ever look my dad in the eye again after accusing him of something like that. So, I carried on like normal, despite my strange gut feeling. However, all the strange goings-on at home continued. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps, and I knew they weren't my father's. I could just tell by the weight of them. I was extremely frightened. I lay there in bed, praying they didn't come to my room. I pulled the covers up and tightened them over my head, but the covers couldn't drown out the sound of footsteps approaching. Despite my best wishes, they appeared to enter my bedroom. I really hope my dad wasn't right about this actually being intruders. I heard the footsteps stop at the side of my bed and felt a presence come close to my cheek. I opened my eyes and thought I could see my mother standing by the side of my bed. Whether this was real or just a dream, the figure looked me in the eyes and said 2 words, "Get out." I was terrified. I screwed my eyes shut and turned over on my side. After a few seconds, though, I couldn't fight the urge to keep my eyes shut, so I opened them. I looked around, but the figure was gone. I asked myself if it was ever really there at all. Maybe it had just been a hallucination from stress, or maybe I was dreaming, and this was my subconscious trying to tell me something. I guess my theory about my father was really weighing on me. I couldn't live in that house, and I had to move out. I knew I wouldn't be able to tell my father why I was moving, though. On top of that, I wasn't anywhere near old enough to be living alone. I seemed to be the only one in the house who'd had such a strange encounter. My father was moving on as if nothing had happened. Ever since my mom went missing, my father had switched to working at home, doing all the chores and trying to give me the best upbringing I could have hoped for. When I sat down with him at dinner, it felt very awkward to have these doubts in my mind. I could do little more than pretend that nothing was happening. I fell asleep on the sofa one afternoon, and woke up to a strange feeling in my stomach. I looked over and noticed an old school bag of mine that I hadn't touched in a while. My dad was busy cooking in the kitchen and yelled at me asking what was wrong. I quickly replied that nothing was the matter. I just remembered I had some homework to do. He replied that dinner was almost ready, and I looked over towards the bag. I wondered why I was getting this strange feeling. I got up and went over to it. It was a bag I used to use a while ago, and hadn't touched it ever since my mom had gone away. I started digging through it, thinking maybe I was feeling nostalgic for a time when my mother was there. There was obviously nothing stored in the main compartment of the bag, but I just so happened to open up one of the side pockets and found something inside. What was in there was a small folded note. It had been folded into quarters and been stuffed right into the bottom. I unfolded it and instantly recognized the handwriting. It was a note from my mother, saying that if anything happened to her, then it was my dad's responsibility. I realized that I didn't have the capacity to deal with all this, and so I ran away. I have no idea if the eerie feelings I had in my gut or my theory was true, but I just couldn't stay there anymore. Obviously, I've not been in contact with my father since then, and I've been doing my best to make my way as I go. This happened a couple of years ago. I was driving back home one night on a quiet road. There was a highway that I had recently turned off of to get to my house. I was still about 10 minutes away from home though. As I was driving along that road, suddenly my car started to slow down. I didn't know what was going on. My car had always run great, and it was only a couple of years old. I never had any problems with it. I realized that somehow I had run out of gas. The light had come on earlier, and I guess I'd simply forgotten about it. My car came to a stop, and I felt really stupid about making such an obvious mistake. My first thought was to call a friend and ask them to grab me some gas. When I took out my phone, though, I wasn't getting a signal in this area. It wasn't that big of a surprise. I tried and tried for 10 minutes, but it just wouldn't work. It was pretty late at night, too, almost midnight or so. Even if I could get my phone to work now, my friends were probably already asleep. I knew the area really well and knew there was a gas station just about a mile away. It would be a 20-minute walk on foot, but the weather was nice, so I decided to go walk and grab some gas, then bring it back to my car. It really wasn't all that big of a deal. I got out of my vehicle and luckily had a small gas container in the back. It was empty, but I kept it in my car mainly to buy gas for my lawnmower. After getting out of my car, I started to walk along the side of the road. Now, the roads were very quiet. Since my car had run out of gas, maybe one or two other vehicles had passed me by. I hadn't even really noticed. The road did not have a sidewalk or anything, so I was just walking a few feet off the shoulder. The grass surrounding the roads on both sides was somewhat dense. There were woods as well. I remember that when I got a ways up from my car, I heard a car starting to come down the road behind me. It was coming from the opposite direction, back where my car was. I heard the sound of the car, then slowing down. I stopped to look behind me and saw a pickup truck coming to a stop next to my car on the road. They were probably stopping to see if I needed any help. I turned around and thought about asking whoever it was for a ride to the gas station. What I saw, though, was a man hopping out of the passenger side and another guy getting out of the driver's door. They put what appeared to be ski masks over their faces and approached my vehicle. I was confused and stopped, no longer wanting to approach them or for them to see me. I was pretty sure they hadn't noticed I was there, and probably wouldn't if I stayed put. They probably thought I was still inside my vehicle. I moved closer to the wooded area, but kept watching. They looked inside my windows, as one of them used his phone as a flashlight to peek around. The other guy knocked on one of them and also tried opening all the doors. After this happened, the guys looked in my direction all of a sudden. For whatever reason, they had somehow noticed me. Right after, one of the guys began walking over to me, and the other walked back over to their truck. As I saw this, I turned to keep walking to the gas station. I heard the sound of one of the men begin running, and I looked back to see the first guy now sprinting. The other guy was inside of the truck and began driving toward me. I had no other choice but to go off into the woods. I darted to the right and went into the forest like a deer. I just started running like crazy. It was really thick. There were all kinds of trees and bushes and branches. I heard the first guy enter the woods a ways back from me. I kept running though, not knowing where these woods led or anything. After 2 minutes straight of running as fast as I could through the woods, I reached the other side. I saw a house with a massive yard. I kept running and no longer heard the guy behind me. When I made it closer to the home, I ran behind it and hid. There I caught my breath and tried to figure out what I was going to do. At this hour, I didn't want to knock on the front door of the home. I didn't think they would answer. I waited for several minutes, then carefully headed back down their driveway to the street. It was a really long driveway. Eventually, I did get back to the street I'd been walking on. The men and the truck were nowhere to be seen. I continued with my walk to the gas station, but walked extremely close to the edge of the woods. That way, if I saw the truck coming again, I could go back into hiding. In fact, I did hear a car coming not long after I started walking again. I jumped into the woods and hid, and waited for it to pass by. Because of this, I couldn't tell if it was the truck or not. I have no way of knowing if it actually was. I wasn't going to take any chances though. Eventually, I did make it to the gas station. Then I walked back to my car and filled up my tank with what I'd bought. I made it home after a very memorable night. Looking back, I don't know what those men wanted or who they were. I'm really glad I got away from them though. When I was younger, the elementary school I went to had a kind of mystery that all the kids were wrapped up in. There was a room at the school with a seemingly unopenable door. I don't know when or how this started, but all the kids spread rumors that there was this one door that no one had ever opened. It seemed to be mysteriously and eternally locked. That was until one day, when one kid from school who had been asked to return some supplies for our after-school club to the stationery cupboard noticed that the door was now open. He wasn't that interested in it, as he had been told by our teachers multiple times not to go into that room and that it was off limits. He was in the same class as me, by the way. He told me that the door gave him a bad feeling. I didn't really get that from the door myself, though. We were all staying late after class. I can't remember exactly why, probably some after-school activity. When he came back to our class, he told me and another classmate the door was open, and we were both interested in finding out what may be beyond that mysterious threshold. My classmate, perhaps driven by curiosity, piped up and said, "I'll go take a look." He got up to his feet and went to go check it out. I went with him, but I didn't want to go into the room myself. I wasn't profoundly scared of whatever was inside it necessarily. I was more scared of getting in trouble and getting a detention or something. I waited outside, but I realized I had been waiting a while for him to come back out. I started to get nervous. All the other kids were leaving, and even some teachers looked like they were getting ready to leave too. I nervously paced in the corridor, but no matter how long I waited for him, he did not come out of the room. It just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want to go in before, and I definitely didn't want to go in then. I started to get worried and approached the door to see if I could make out where he'd gone. Just as I was about to crane my head around the door frame, a teacher came along. I told the teacher what happened, and she looked shocked. She made an attempt to look inside for him, and then she muttered something like, "Shouldn't we have a lock on this door?" That was when I realized that the rumor was just a rumor. It was just a door that they locked. I felt dumb for believing that the door at school had some kind of mystical power. The teacher went inside very briefly, and then came back out and said something outrageous. I didn't see anyone in there. That just didn't seem possible to me. I'd watched my classmate go in there and not come back out, so where could he be? He had to be in there still. Logic dictated that to me back then, and it still does now. He went in and he did not come out. I asked the teacher if she was sure, and she said to me in a cold tone that there was no one in that room. She went ahead and shut the door as she said it. I went home because everyone else was leaving. I didn't know what to do. I was a kid, and it's not like I could stay there all night long. I told my mom about what happened, and she must have seen how worked up I was, because she called the school and hoped that a teacher or janitor might still be there. She came into my bedroom after she got off the phone with someone, giving me a big smile and saying, "Your little class friend went home. One of your teachers told me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He didn't go home, though. I was waiting for him when he went into that room, and I never saw him come out. By the way, this wasn't some room that was massive or on the ground floor or anything like that. It was on the 3rd floor. Had he jumped out of a window for some reason, he wouldn't have made it back home in one piece. I couldn't believe the teacher didn't even bother to go in and do a proper sweep of the room. Now they were telling me he'd just gone home. I wasn't buying it. My mom laughed at my frustration and said I must have just misunderstood the situation, but I knew I was being lied to. I waited for school the next day. I had so many questions, and if I'm being honest, a part of me did believe there was a small chance my classmate ended up slipping past me somehow and going home. Maybe he hid in the room to avoid the teachers and not get in trouble. I don't know. When I got to school, though, and looked over at the desk he would have occupied, it was empty. I hoped against my better judgment that he might just be running late, but I was once again wrong. I was told before the end of the day that apparently he had suddenly moved away. I never saw the door he went through open again after that, and I still get anxious about what happened. I mean, it's possible he really did move, but why was everything so sudden? And why was all the news coming out of our teachers and none of it from him? It didn't make any sense to me. It's been so long that I can't even really remember his name. A lot of my memory from that time is hazy. I do remember that a lot of weird stuff went on in my hometown back then. Always a big military and police presence. I don't know if that means anything, but as an adult, I realized that my town was pretty unique. I wonder if he stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous with it being a school and all, but here in Japan they do sometimes hide secret things in public schools, hiding in plain sight, so they say. I really want to know if that kid ended up being alright. I hope that's the case. I think about this often. I'd go back to our school to check out that room, but the school isn't there anymore. I knew this guy, living on the bottom floor with his girlfriend in the same apartment building I lived in. He was very friendly and very polite, and worked every day. He would get dropped off right in front of the building, and talk and make everyone he met laugh. One thing I noticed, though, was that his girlfriend hardly ever talked to or spoke to anyone. I remember one day I introduced myself to her, as she was nervously watching for her boyfriend to pull up from work. That's my guess, at least. Anyway, she and I began talking a little bit more often, but she was very careful about what time she would talk to me. I also began to notice a couple of bruises on her face and hands. She was such a beautiful woman, and it was really disheartening to see her being abused like this, and there wasn't really anything I could do but try and report it. which never did anything. Her boyfriend was a class clown, so to speak, so everyone else thought he was just a really nice and stand-up guy. I could see through him by now, so I just kept my distance. It's all I could really do. One evening, he was drinking outside with the other neighbors. I had to go check my mail, and it was getting late, so a little bit before dark, I decided to go do it. I left my door unlocked because I was really young and naive. This was also my first apartment at just 18, and I didn't really think it would take that long. I got back from checking my mail and saw everyone had gone inside. I went into my apartment and took a shower and got ready for bed. I jumped in, and about 10 minutes later, I began to hear a man snoring. It was coming from within my bedroom closet. Needless to say, I immediately freaked out and ran to get another neighbor to take a look inside my closet. I certainly wasn't going to look by myself. Well, of course, it was that very same guy who had trespassed into my apartment and passed out after drinking. I was hysterical, terrified. The neighbor got him up and took him to his home to his girlfriend. 3 years later, she apparently left him because he was violently abusing her. She went to go live with her parents. Well, he found her, killed both of her parents and her grandmother, I believe, and beat up the girlfriend so badly that she was paralyzed and in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. She had to witness him killing her entire family. It was years later when I found out about this, and it was so devastating and sad. I couldn't stop crying. I often wondered if he was planning to attack me too. I can't even imagine what she had gone through, losing her loved ones to that monster. Everyone liked him. Hell, at first I did too. He seemed genuinely funny and nice, but meeting his girlfriend really changed my mind about him real quick. It's a shame that no one else could see through his lies. I, female and 23, was staying with my friend who's also female and 23 for a couple of weeks in the town I grew up in. She works at a restaurant, and without giving away too many details about the specific location, it's in a plaza with a river nearby. The plaza has the usual amenities of a movie theater, various restaurants and boutiques, and all that sort of thing. We entered through the parking garage, which has 3 stories, both elevators and stairs. This is important. She had a 6-hour shift, so I decided to do some shopping, listen to music, and walk around before eating at the restaurant my friend works at. I remember I was sitting at the bar on the corner alone, listening to some music. That was when a bigger man approached me. He had a security guard beanie on that was incredibly dirty and tattered up, and he was muttering with his eyes barely open. All I could hear from his muttering was things like, "Are you? I like your... Is anyone sitting?" But keep in mind, it was incredibly muted. I'm guessing what he was trying to say was asking to sit next to me and trying to compliment me. All of this was said while he was switching back and forth between looking into my eyes and staring at my chest. I tried to tell the man multiple times that I just could not understand what he was saying. After a bit of back and forth, I put the headphones back in and he left me alone. I told my friend about what happened and tried to shake it off, hoping it was just a weird, isolated incident. If that was where the story ended, I wouldn't even be writing this. Unfortunately, though, it's obviously not. About an hour later, I see someone approach the bar to my left out of the corner of my eye and felt their gaze fixate on me. I didn't look, but somehow I immediately knew it was him. I texted my friend and told her I was feeling really sketched out. I wanted to believe that I was simply misreading things and letting my anxiety get the best of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling there was something off with this guy. 30 minutes or so later, my friend got off. As we started walking toward the parking garage stairs to get to our car, I could see him waiting on a bench nearby, waiting for me. The benches aren't super close to the elevators. The second I spotted him, my blood ran cold. He saw us walking toward the stairs to the parking garage, and all of a sudden stood up and started sprinting for us. I was face to face with him by the time we got to the top of the stairs. We booked it back to the restaurant and used the employee elevator to get to her car. An employee escorted us to the vehicle as well. The employee told us there are a lot of cases of homeless people who wander around the area. I presume he was homeless and just walking in and out of various restaurants until he saw me. I'm incredibly thankful I trusted my gut and that I spotted him. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't see him at first, but I don't want to find out. When I was about 5 years old, my mom had a boyfriend who ended up being my little brother's dad. I guess he was my stepdad, but the real dad to my half-brother. We'll call him Daniel. I loved and will always love my little brother, but his dad caused a whole lot of trauma for all of us. I was about 8 years old at the time, and my little brother was 3. We shared a bedroom right next to my mom and Daniel's room. My little brother was fast asleep, and I was just about to close my eyes and drift off. That was until I heard a rumbling through the wall. I jolted my eyes wide awake, and I was frozen in place, trying to be as quiet as I could. I wanted to hear what was going on. I could hear my mom quietly telling Daniel, "Stop, you're hurting me." My heart dropped. I didn't know what to do. I was scared and couldn't move. My ears felt red as I heard my own heartbeat pounding loud. And that's when I heard my mother begin screaming, "Stop, I can't breathe!" I heard a loud thud, which I'm assuming was Daniel pushing her off. I heard her tumbling down, and I quickly laid back down. I couldn't stop looking at the doorway. I watched as my mom's door swung open, and then she ran out of the bedroom crying. I presume she ran downstairs to our bathroom, which had a lock on it. Not even 2 seconds later, Daniel began chasing her. He banged on the bathroom door and yelled to open it up. My mom replied, "No, why did I wake up to you choking me?" I was now trembling in my bed. The floorboards were paper thin, which was no help shielding me away from my trauma. I could hear Daniel continuing to bang on the door, sounding like he was trying to break it down, but to no avail. I saw him walk back into the bedroom. My mom, after a while, came into our room and then closed the door ever so quietly. She slept with my little brother on the top bunk. This was the first time of many assaults from what Daniel did to my mom. There's been many times where he's cheated on her, thrown her plate off the table after she cooked us all dinner, and even stolen her keys to make sure she couldn't leave for work or school. This next one isn't the second one he did, but it's the second earliest one I can still remember so vividly. I was about 9 or 10 at the time, and my little brother had an issue wetting the bed. He had a cutoff point to be able to drink water. My mom and Daniel had been fighting and arguing all day. However, my brother was sick, and he was drawing a fever. I was helping my mom to put away the dishes after dinner, and saw my brother walk in asking for a glass of water. My mother turned to him and said, "Now, you're not going to wet the bed if I give this to you, right? You gotta make sure you go to the bathroom." He shook his head no, and said he promised to make sure before going to bed. I handed her a clean glass from the dishwasher, and she gave it to him. Soon after, we heard loud stomps coming from the living room. My mom quickly took the glass away from him and hid it behind her back. It felt like slow motion as I saw the fear in my mom's eyes. Daniel got right up into her face and took the glass from behind my mom. He splashed the water in her face and then smashed it against her head. I couldn't help myself but to scream. My mom stumbled back as Daniel then threw the glass on the ground and shattered it. He dragged my little brother by the shoulder as he was crying. I made sure my mom was okay, and we could hear Daniel screaming at my little brother. My mom and I rushed in there, and she tried to tell him it was her fault, and he was just not feeling well. Daniel and my mom continued to fight, while me and my little brother cried in bed. I know these stories aren't exactly uncommon, but as a kid, I witnessed stuff like this multiple times firsthand. It gave me major PTSD as an adult, and I would never wish someone to live the childhood I lived. It was awful. This happened about 7 years ago. On a business trip, I stayed in Ikebukuro in a well-known hotel. There's something I want to mention about me. Sometimes I feel as if I have a sixth sense. By that, I mean I feel as if I'm aware of otherworldly presences when I encounter them. I wouldn't say this sense of mine is particularly strong, but it is there. I want to share an experience that happened when I stayed in that hotel. The room I stayed in was room 913. I was staying for one night. A senior coworker at my company was staying in the room next door. From the moment I opened the door to room 913, I felt something strange. I had this weird feeling I hadn't ever had before. It was, and still is, indescribable. Because that indescribable feeling was so unusual, I didn't know what to think about it. I figured it was just my imagination. Now I can see it was clearly an early warning sign. I was picking up on a red flag. As night came and darkness fell upon the hotel quickly. It was February, by the way. I thought the best thing I could do for work the following morning was go ahead and get an early night's sleep. I drifted off with ease, but I didn't stay awake for very long at all. I woke up to the sound of someone barging into my hotel room. I could tell it was a man almost instantly. It was like I knew without even seeing him. I could also tell that this appeared to be some sort of sleep paralysis, the beginning of some kind of nightmare. My brain was fully functioning, but my body was glued to the bed. It was like I was just watching what was happening, as if it were a movie or out-of-body experience. The man who was in my room was not a native Japanese person like me. I was sleeping on my side with my back facing the door, and the man had just come in. He wandered around my dark hotel room for a while, and then walked around the bed to face me. He stared right into my face, and looked so angry and rage-filled. Suddenly, his hand shot to my neck, and he began to choke me. I was so scared of how much this man seemed to hate me and want to hurt me. I felt myself choking and losing oxygen. I really started to panic, and then all of a sudden I was able to move like nothing had happened. I was all alone in my hotel room. I was so freaked out by what had just happened that I wanted to call my coworker. I wanted to speak to someone. I couldn't, though. I hadn't left my phone by my bedside table. I had left it to charge on a desk, and there was a mirror on that desk. There was no way in hell I was going to look into that past midnight. Side note, mirrors are a very prominent item in Japanese spiritual folklore. There's a belief for some people in Japan that if you look at yourself in a mirror after midnight, you might see something else there. Mirrors can be considered portals and pathways into different worlds. I stayed awake until the early morning light spilled into the room, and only at that point did I feel confident enough to shut my eyes for a few moments. My colleague came to my hotel room so we could head downstairs for breakfast together. After checking it was him out of the peephole, he cried out in shock when he saw me open the door. He could tell that something was wrong. I looked terrible. At breakfast, I talked to him about what happened the night before. The worst thing about our situation was the fact we were staying at that hotel for another few nights. After work that day, I called a friend of a friend who was into the occult and supernatural and asked him for some advice. He told me how to better deal with what I had experienced, and I followed his instructions. It did nothing to improve the atmosphere, though. What he got me to do managed to at least calm me down. Just after midnight, I heard a loud bang coming from the wall that separated my room from my colleagues. It scared the hell out of me. It sounded like a really powerful blow. After I gave it some thought, I guessed that it could have been my colleague playing a prank on me. With that in mind, I managed to get some sleep. In the morning, I saw my colleague again for breakfast, and I said to him, "Oh, great prank last night, banging on the wall like that." He said he had no idea what I was talking about. To be completely honest, I'm pretty sure he was telling the truth about that. It scared me to think I may have been close to experiencing another paranormal onslaught. Thankfully, nothing else happened that night, and only a few eerie occurrences for the rest of the trip. I can still remember the face of that figure who strangled me. I look for that face in the crowds of Tokyo, but I don't think I'll ever see him. If I did, I think I'd have a heart attack. I wonder if that was just my brain conjuring up that man attacking me, or if something really supernatural happened in that hotel room. Back when I was 23, I was a single mom living in Melbourne, Australia. One morning, I dropped my eldest off at school in the morning and was walking with my youngest in the pram. As I was walking, I saw a man stood smoking across the road. He looked like a complete bogan. He had no top on, gold chains, and bad teeth, and when he saw me, he started walking across the road to cut me off on the pavement. I thought to myself, oh God, here we go. I crossed over, but he followed me again. My instincts were going haywire when suddenly he ran up behind me and started saying, "I love your baby. Let me hold him. Let me hold him." I said I was nearly home, and my partner would not be happy about him hassling me like this. He got all angry, saying he'd bash my partner and then bash me. I'd never felt my body prepare me so much for a fight-or-flight situation before. I was still on a steep hill, and I knew I couldn't let go of the pram to fight him off. There seemed to be nobody about at that time in the morning either, so no one to help me if he did try to attack me. As I got home, I rushed through the door, and by some miracle I managed to shut it before he could force his way in behind me. I hid my son upstairs in his cot and began frantically ringing the police. I saw the man climb over my back fence and begin looking through my patio doors right at me, fogging up the window with his manic smile. His teeth were really bad, honestly disgusting. I just remember the sight of them the most. The police response was brilliant though, as they arrived within just 15 minutes. By that time, the bloke had already gone. It turned out that after he had followed me home, he dragged another lady down an alleyway and tried to bash her. Her little barking dog saved her by barking so loud another man came to help. About 2 months later, the police caught him, with mine and the lady's help, and I'm happy to say he served 7 years in prison. I used to go and spend time at my friend's house often when I was growing up. We both met in high school and were friends from a very young age. However, whereas I lived in town, he lived in a completely rural area. At a certain age, we began having weekend sleepovers. Our parents didn't drive us over though. We would just take the other's bus home from school on a Friday afternoon. We would be doing this sort of thing very regularly for most of our entire childhood. My buddy, Carl, and I used to explore the countryside that surrounded the house he grew up in. By the time we were in our teens, we were very familiar with it, and actually quite bored with it too. We had been out hiking in that area so many times, there weren't any areas that we didn't know by heart. When we were 14 years old, however, I had a new experience. One of our mutual friends who was 15 was driving his dad's old pickup Ever since his dad got a new vehicle, he didn't have a license, but as long as we stayed in the rural areas, he wouldn't get in trouble for driving. Even though it was thrilling enough to just be sitting in the back bed of the truck drinking a beer we had stolen from Carl's dad, we also wanted to explore areas we hadn't had chances to before. So about 4 of us got together early one Saturday morning and went driving way out into the hills. We were looking for some place that was as far out as we could find, and we could be exploring what we considered to be unknown territory. We drove around quite a lot, trying to find some of the deepest woods we could find, yet still accessed by road. We ended up driving off-road when the road ended, but it still looked like other vehicles had driven along that ground. We figured that made it safe to do. Eventually, though, we went ahead and stopped the truck when the trees got too thick to really drive any further. This was easily the furthest out in the country I had ever been in my life. That excited rather than scared me, though. This gave us a completely new area to look around in. The 4 of us strayed apart from each other, while also sticking together. We made sure all of us were in vocal range, and would rarely get out of each other's sight either. We didn't know exactly what we were looking for, only that we were indeed out there looking for something. I don't know how long we were out there before Carl and I heard one of the other guys yelp. It was a weird noise he made, and it sounded like he was in distress. In that moment, he was out of sight, so we had to rush over to where we thought we heard his yelp come from. All 3 of us went over the hill we were hiking on, and stopped when we saw what made our friend call out. There were at least 7 full-grown adults, dressed in camouflage, sitting at a camp on the side of the hill. They looked like they were actually military guys, and not just a bunch of backwoods people pretending like they were. One of the guys was holding our friend who had yelped, with their hand over his mouth. The 3 of us reacted poorly. We were about to turn around and start running. I guess we selfishly only wanted to protect ourselves. We didn't even get the chance to perform this cowardly act, though. Several of the military men pulled guns on us and stopped us in our tracks. They ordered us over to their camp, and the 3 of us were scared to death we were all going to be shot. I didn't know what to do, but I was terrified. I was just going to do whatever these soldiers told me to do, in hopes I wasn't going to get shot and killed. The soldiers ordered the 4 of us over there and into one of the tents they had set up. They didn't tie us or anything, but one of them told us they had better not hear a peep out of us, or we would regret it. He definitely spoke with an accent, but it wasn't one I recognized, or even nowadays could even guess as to what it was. The 4 of us sat there in the tent terrified, and we heard some talking going on outside. We were unable to make out what was being talked about. Carl kept trying to whisper about trying to find a way out, but we shushed him. Finding a way out of there and getting away from 7 soldiers with guns wasn't going to be easy. Eventually, they blindfolded all 4 of us and tied our hands behind our backs. I was absolutely sure they were going to kill us. They took us and began guiding us away from the camp, although I had no idea what direction they were taking us off to. The only thing I could tell was they were guiding us downhill. Eventually, they put us all in the back of a vehicle and began driving. It was at least an hour's worth before they finally stopped. At one point after that, they stopped and began untying our hands. When the blindfolds were removed, we noticed we were in the back of our friend's truck. The guy untying us, the guy with the accent, told us to get in the truck and do our best to forget everything we saw that day. He said the only reason he was letting us live was that they couldn't have people searching for missing children out in the woods. If we knew what was best for us, we wouldn't tell anyone anything. We drove off immediately. They had driven the truck along with a truck of their own toward an unfamiliar area, and we had to find out where we were and drive back home. We talked about what we had seen, but none of us were really sure. We weren't sure if they were American troops, foreign troops, or members of a backwoods militia. We didn't know what to do. Carl and I kept it to ourselves. I'm not too sure about the other guys though. Carl and I figured the guy's advice was quite sound. We were willing to do our best and just forget about them. This was back in the 70s, and Carl and I are still friends. We don't know what happened to the other two guys though. We've told this story many times since then, and we figure there's no chance we'd be in danger now. We both really thought we were going to die back then though. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in the comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.